friend in the whole world. She's great. I mean, they stayed in Michigan, so it's difficult, and we're very, very different. My little sister's more like me than not, but my older sister and I are just, we're very different.
Isn't that weird how you can be related to someone and just like, wow, couldn't be more different. Like if you weren't related, you would never be friends with that person. I mean, I don't know if that's your case, but
She's told me that. She's told me that on a number of occasions. She's like, the only reason that you're in my life is because I'm related to you. I would not be friends with you. And her husband told me that once too. And I was like, well, I think you're both assholes. I would never say that to you, even if I thought it.
Well, at least the lines of communication are open. No one's holding things in.
No. And I'm like, well, that's, I think their problem with me is I don't hold things in. When I see somebody, unjustly calling out a woman for exposing her large breasts in a low-cut V-neck and like they're being completely judgmental about it, I literally will open my mouth and be like, look away. It's none of your fucking business. She can wear whatever she wants. And then they all get pissed at me. And I'm like, well, fuck you. I wish I would keep my mouth shut more. Let's put it that way. They're like, you talk too much. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's how I feel. Yeah.
So then how did you leave and go to California after NBC, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So I had to get a second job when I was working at NBC News because they don't pay you very much at all as a PA. And so I took a second job, and my producer was great. She was advocating for me with the higher echelons in the system. And she was like, let her go do, on the street man interviews and whatever, and man on the street interviews, and let her do this, let her do that. So she was fighting for me, but it's a slow turnover, but I really just didn't enjoy being there. So I had a second job as a makeup artist at Macy's, at the department store, in the evenings and on the weekends. And I started to get so tired that when I'd get up to go to Detroit to go to the newsroom, I would throw up. I was like making myself throw up. I hated it that much, I think. I think I did. But I'm hard to say I quit. Like I feel like if I've committed to something that I owe it to everybody I've committed to see that through, whatever that thing is, right? So I lasted about 2 months, and it's probably the smartest thing my dad ever said to me, because he never gave up on his job. I mean, he, retired 30 years with one job, right? Like his generation does. But he said to me, if you're getting this sick at this age, you should quit and do something else. And I was like, wait, I can do that? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. So I called to give my notice. I was like, first of all, I'm not coming in today because I just threw up. And second of all, I quit. And my producer liked me enough. She was a woman, very smart, very strong, had great opinions, great thoughts. And she was like, I don't want to lose you. I want to keep you. What can I do to make you stay? And I said, I don't think you can, because I think I belong in California. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I want to write creatively, and I'm going to do that in California. And she was like, okay, give me 5 minutes. She calls me back in 5 minutes. She's like, I can make you the producer of the lottery show. It's 24 hours a week, and you can write whatever you want then. And I was like, I'm going to pass. I never belonged.
You believed in yourself.
I did. And I never belonged in Michigan. And I always knew that from a young age. I always had very different principles, for as blue as it is of a state, often I was far more liberal than it ever was, or the communities I ever found. Like, when half of my friends in college were engaged a year before we were graduating, or the year we were graduating, and I was like engaged, I hadn't even had a boyfriend at that point. I had plenty of dates. Don't get me wrong. I just never would commit to even having a boyfriend, because aren't we there to learn to be independent in ourselves? Like, why would I be committing to marriage in college to just, what do you do then? Oh, have babies. I mean, all their kids are like in college now, and I'm stymied because I have a 5-year-old, and I'm like, I think that's appropriate. So I knew that I never belonged. I never fitted. Nobody ever understood me. Even in my sorority, they were always like, Stickle, you're so weird. But was I? Like, am I weird? I just think that they were weird, or they didn't understand my need for something bigger. I just always knew that there was something bigger, and I had to find out what that was.
So then what, you just pack your car and drive?
That's what I did. So I quit my job on a Tuesday. On Tuesday afternoon, I went to AAA and got a triptych. That's what they were called, kids, because we didn't have GPS. So I got a triptych, which is a paper map of the country, and I tracked my trail. My dad helped me track my route. I was going to go the southern route, so I didn't have to go through too many mountains, and I would come up through San Diego. That was where all the mountains that I'd have to endure would be. I had a little black Ford Tempo that I had gotten used in college, and it fit a very large TV, only large. It was only a 15-inch TV, but they used to have that deep back, right? They were flat screen.
Yes.
So it fit that. And this was on Wednesday morning, and I put a blanket over it, and I packed a duffel bag. It was like a military style duffel bag with toothbrush and enough clothes. I didn't have that many clothes. I was pretty poor. So it's like 5 t-shirts and a pair of shorts and a pair of jeans, 2 pairs of shoes. And I have pictures of the day I left, and nobody said, don't go. It was like, my mom said nothing to me. My dad was like, all right, be careful. I had a weird cell phone that I think cost 25 cents a minute to use. And I gassed up the car. And on Thursday morning, I left, and I found, I still have the notebook. It's a little tiny, steno notepad that I would use for taking notes when I was at work. And I tracked how many hours I drove, how many miles that was, and how much I spent on gas each day, and how much gas per gallon it was. And I got to the hotels, and I just wanted somebody to know I was there. So I'd make a phone call and be like, I'm at this hotel in Oklahoma, blah, blah, blah. And then I stopped in Arizona where my grandparents lived, and I stayed one night with them. And I went to the grocery store where they used to have catalogs, paper catalogs in the grocery store in color. And it would show you these huge apartment complexes that were owned by big conglomerates at the time, and like where they were. And I found an apartment in that catalog. And I called them and I was like, yeah, I need an apartment. They were like, oh, okay, do you want to come look at it? And I was like, nope, I'll be there to move in 2 days. And they were like, we need a cashier's check. So I asked my dad to take care of that, because at the time you couldn't just Venmo them or like send a check from the bank. Like you seriously needed like a cashier's check. So he actually did that for me, and I paid him back. I sent him a check in the mail, because it couldn't be a personal check either. It had to be a cashier's check. And I paid him back. I sent him a personal check in the mail, and I got to the apartment, and I sat outside the apartment. I fought with them all the way there, because they were like, we're going home for the night. We close at 6. The front office closes at 6.
First of all, what part of town is this in? Not knowing where you're going. Like, where did you land?
Atwater Village, Los Feliz.
Okay, that's not so bad. Although back then it was kind of,
it was sketchy.
So great, but yeah.
It was very sketchy. And it was $950 a month for 375 square feet. It was expensive, more money than I don't even know. It was expensive, and it sucked. I had cockroaches. It was like, you couldn't go down the corner. You couldn't go past the apartment building, because at the corner is where they sold drugs. It reminded me something straight out of Breaking Bad at the time I lived there. Mm-hmm. Like one night there was the news in the morning, like right in the front of my apartment building, somebody was stabbed to death.
We used to rehearse underneath the little market that I think is now a wine shop, right when you come over the bridge to go to Atwater. And it was a really crappy neighborhood. And there were all these men who were very dirty and very old that would ride around on 10-speed bikes. And they had these bike wars. If one of the gangs took the other gang's bike, it was turned into this huge, crazy thing. And it was definitely super sketchy. Yeah. But
yeah, that's exactly where I lived. So you come right over the bridge, over the 5 into Atwater. Yeah. Uh-huh. And it's on Los Feliz Boulevard. And right on the left, right next to that weird little golf, which is actually like real golf behind it or something, there's an apartment complex. And that was the apartment complex I lived in. It was crazy. They just didn't require a lot to move in. So, you know.
And you could find them in a catalog in, Arizona or wherever you were. And
yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, kids these days don't realize how like when we were touring back then, it's like, well, you buy a map at the state line and try to figure out how you're going to get to where you need to go. Like, do you take the little road? I mean, because it looks like more of a straight shot, but it could also be like crazy backcountry and take you actually longer than taking the longer highway. You had to like do all these calculations.
Right. And if you're traveling alone as like a 23-year-old girl, you cannot take back roads. You can't afford to like have your car fail you or stay in some weird hotel. Like I had to map it where I was safe, like I had to map out and know where I was going to stop ahead of time so that I was safe. Honestly, I always had a good amount of fear of the world, because my mom instilled in us very young, like if you look at somebody wrong, they'll either kidnap you or kill you. And so that sounds terrible, but she started telling us that when we were like,
I think my dad instilled a similar fear in me, so I understand.
Right. So when you're a woman, you're always looking over your shoulder. Well, I was. I mean, you try not to, people try to teach you to grow up not naively, I would say, and have a healthy fear of the world around you. And I think that sucks. But at the same time, it probably saved me because I was very much on my own and probably shouldn't have been like driving across the country by myself. But, whatever. I did.
Yeah, but then you're like, I can do anything. Yeah, I grew up with an unhealthy fear of serial killers. There's so many serial killers where I'm from growing up. And like, I'm the only person I know who's like, I'm vigilant. Like I'm constantly on alert for like, we got to lock all the doors. We got to do this because serial killers. And Greg's always like, wait, that is crazy. But it's not crazy. That's how they get you when you're not on high alert.
When my husband met me, I was living alone again. I've had roommates like in and out, and I was living on my own, and I would booby trap my apartment so that I would know if somebody had entered, and they would get struck with one of my booby traps and give me just enough time to like crawl out the window or have my escape plan, depending on where they were coming in. So I was a big booby trapper because of serial killers. Oh, for sure.
Well, this is why we're friends, obviously.
Yeah. And I never, ever went home with a dude. Like I was like, no, I'm not going to hang out at your place until I have like your social security number, your mother's maiden name. I want a photocopy of your driver's license. And that would scare the shit out of the wrong guy, right? Like they would be like, you need what? And I was like, yeah, mofo, like I'm not going to end up disappeared without anybody knowing who did it. You are going to be known. So get used to it. The only person that ever gave up all that information, so the only person I ever like really went home with was Jason Bieber. He was like, sure, my mom's last name is Azulai. And I was like, are you lying to me? And he was like, no, she's Israeli. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he gave me his social security number. This was like after our first date, before our second date. He gave me all his information because he wanted me to go to San Francisco with him, do like a day trip, stay in a hotel. He was like, I'm getting your own room.
Oh my gosh. That is hilarious.
So he gave me everything. And then I married him because I trusted him immediately. I was like, okay.
So when you made it to LA, did you immediately get involved with like sketch and stuff, or did it take time, or how did you
find
time. Your way?
I had no friends. I knew nobody. My makeup job, I worked for Prescriptives Cosmetics, and I got to shout out to Prescriptives because they're online now, but they took care of me. It was an all women company, all women. All the account coordinators, all the account executives, the regional managers, they were all women. And my manager back in Detroit made a phone call to California and asked them to give me a job as a makeup artist, freelance makeup artist. And they did. And when they asked her what my pay was, she put me at the top pay rate.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And she called me before I left, and she was like, do you, she was like, I'm proud of you. Go. Make your dreams come true. Don't come home. I mean, it was just like, it was a very maternal thing, which I wasn't used to. And I thank her every day for that because I don't know. So I got out here and I did the makeup job. So I met a lot of makeup artists who were really very special people.
That's a good crew to meet. Yeah.
Group of very special people. Most of them I'm still friends with. Very lovely human beings and take care of each other. So that was great. And I got a job at Starbucks. So I would open Starbucks in the morning. I would work the 4:30 a.m. shift. So basically we opened at 5. I'd have to be there at 4:30 and I'd work 4:30 to 8:30. And then I'd go work makeup from 11 to 7. And then twice a month I toured with the international auto shows. I had booked a gig with them in Detroit before I left. So I worked 3 jobs. And then I finally found through one of the makeup artists, an acting coach. And I signed up for the acting class. And from there, found my way to sketch, found my way to Groundlings first. So I did Groundlings first. And then that led me to Second City and graduating from Second City, where I met 2 of the best women in my life. Like, they're great women. Like, they're such role models and they're so strong. And we've been friends for 12 years now, I think. So yeah. It was a long road. It was a long process. It doesn't happen overnight, but you have to stay committed. Like, if it means something to you and if you're never going to feel satisfied until you do these things, then why are you giving up on these things? You know, things are hard, things are challenging. I slept in my car. I couldn't afford my apartment. I had to find somebody to live with, and I found somebody, but they weren't moving out here. I found someone, a friend of a friend, and they weren't moving out for like 6 weeks. So I slept in my car for a couple weeks. And then finally a friend was like, you can come sleep on my couch. The couch was a chair.